Welcome to another edition of Dan Frequently Asked Questions. In this edition, we'll be discussing headaches and diving. Keep watching. We got a question from a diver who said that after they had done a very shallow dive, they ascended slightly more quickly than they had planned and continued diving afterwards. But at the end of the day's diving, they noticed a vague headache that continued and persisted. They had no other symptoms, and they have had headaches in the past. So, is this something to worry about? Is this something that they should see a diving physician for? Well, the answer isn't straightforward, but I'd like to use this to illustrate a couple of things when it comes to headaches and diving. First of all, headaches are quite common with diving for a variety of reasons. One of the most common is that divers tend to skip breathe. So that means that they conserve breath, or they try and conserve their air by essentially deliberately slowing the rate at which they're breathing. But in the process, even though the oxygen requirements are high enough, their carbon dioxide gradually increases. It widens the blood vessels, and eventually it can cause throbbing and even nausea. This tends to clear within about 30 minutes to an hour after a dive. The second type of headache, which is also quite common, is where divers have the pillar valve behind their heads a little bit too high up on their BC, so that they have to crane their neck past the pillar valve to avoid bumping it on the cylinder, and in the process strain their neck muscles and shoulder muscles in order to do so. This tends to produce a more specific headache at the back of the head. It can sometimes come forward. It is usually not throbbing, but it can be persistent, and it can last sometimes for several hours or even a day or more. And then finally, there's also the tendency of divers to clamp down on their regulator mouthpiece, especially if it's a poorly fitting one, in order to maintain a seal, and then their temporomandibular joints, in other words, the hinge of the jaw, become strained together with the muscles, and that ultimately causes a headache that goes usually up the sides of the face. And I can add, perhaps, if you have sinusitis and the pressure causes irritation of the sinuses, you can have pain over the frontal sinuses, then it's usually above the eye and very sharp. The maxillary sinuses, and then you usually feel it in the teeth. It can be between the eyes, which are the ethmoid sinuses, and behind the eyes, we have the sphenoid sinus. And this, again, either refers to the back of the head or the top of the head and is associated with pressure change. Now, usually this type of headache is associated with nasal congestion, and someone would know that that is the problem. But what you can also do to just see if that is, in fact, the cause of the headache, you can bend over forwards with your head as low as possible, and then the additional blood that flows into the head actually will aggravate the sense of pain in the sinuses. So those are some of the things you can do to determine whether it is truly a diving-related headache, but not particularly a serious one. Now, the type of headache that would be serious is when it is associated with arterial gas embolism, although this is usually painless. And then it would be in conjunction with either loss of vision or, in extreme cases, paralysis and even a slight loss of consciousness, after which, as the diver comes to, there may be some additional headache. And then you can also perhaps add those that develop migraines or migraines. And migraines can occur at any time, including after diving. But usually divers are familiar with migraine headaches. So getting back to the particular question we've been asked, in this case, I doubt very much that it is the result of a specific diving disease or disorder, and it is more likely to be one of the prior conditions that I mentioned. If the headache persists, of course, it's always wise to see a physician or doctor, or a diving doctor in particular, who may then be able to elicit particular history aspects that would add accuracy to the decision. I hope that's been useful, and until next time, safe diving.